So for some students, they may want to take a particular course, but when they look at the syllabus, they realize that the course is either assignment-based or essay-based, and this deters them from pursuing or taking that course because they feel that they're not a strong writer. So here are some tips if you are a strong writer in the perspective of someone who marks a lot of different assignments, where my courses are primarily assignment-based. So when I review assignments, whether it be, short 500-word assignments or group projects where they have to submit reports and PowerPoints, or if it's a longer essay assignment where it's probably in the upwards of 1,000 words or so, the common issues that I see with these assignments, and in particular for students who often get in the high 70s, low 80s, and they can't really break into the higher 80s, it's for one reason, and it is the flow of their assignment. So what do I mean by flow here? So if you're looking at the assignment instructions, normally instructions are probably going to tell you, list 2 to 3 challenges, or tell me, 3 or 4 points, explain why you think so, and obviously it's going to imply that there's going to be an introduction and conclusion. Oftentimes, if you're getting the high 70s, low 80s range, you're likely are telling the prof, the 2 to 3 challenges, or the 5 to 5, or the 4 to 5 challenges, depending on what the assignment instructions are. But the issue that you have with your assignment is the quality of the analysis is probably a little confusing. So you probably have really good points, but in hopes of trying to weave and try to flow your assignment, you're probably causing a little bit of confusion. So a lot of issues, and a common issue that I often see is oftentimes students try to write and explain one point really well, and normally the first point they do it bang on, and then for the second point they start explaining, but then they start trying different strategies in the second paragraph to kind of connect it to the first point, but they end up just regurgitating what they wrote for the first paragraph. So and then this problem exacerbates again in the in the third paragraph, in the fourth paragraph, so on and so forth, depending on how long your assignment is. So when you do it over and over again, this issue is really put up front into the surface, and it really compounds to the point where profs will then end up taking your marks. It's no longer about like one fragment sentence or one run-on or one confusing sentence. It's about your entire assignment. There's confusion all around. So if you're one of those people who think you need to link it to the previous point, then really consider whether or not what you're writing is a regurgitation of a point that was previously stated, or if it's a unique statement, or if it's actually a good connecting statement. Because if it is not, my tip would be for you to just drop those sentences, because it's actually doing a lot more harm than good. The second thing that I commonly see in assignments that are doing okay, but they're not hitting that high mark range, is because a lot of students forget to write a conclusion. In the university and college level, we don't tell students to put in an intro and conclusion, because that's kind of implied already. So even if the assignment instructions is not telling you specifically to to write an intro and to write a conclusion, you should always do it. Oftentimes students do know how to write an introduction, because that's their way of getting into the meat of their assignment, but a lot of students don't write a conclusion. So a lot of assignments that I see is they end up with an intro, an okay meat of the essay, where they explain their points and justify the reasoning, and then they end it right there. There's no concluding statement, there's no concluding paragraph, and again, this is another way where you are losing a lot of points. Oftentimes formatting issues like this, where you have no concluding paragraph, depending on the prof, normally will probably take off like a letter grade. So again, another really easy tip for you to always include, and hopefully you can definitely see a lot of improvements in grades if you are the type of student who often forgets to write conclusion. And obviously conclusions don't have to be long. It can be a sentence that wraps up your 3 main points, just regurgitate it again. We're not looking at anything specific in the conclusion, but for sure we are looking for a conclusion to make sure you at least somewhat wrap up the assignment. And definitely don't submit any assignments where you end off with the 3 points, for example. It's just not a very good way, and definitely not a tidy way of submitting assignment. So if you're one of those students who, really dislike going into courses where there's a lot of assignments or group projects because you're not a strong writer, then these are my tips that I commonly see in students that are struggling with, hitting the higher range marks. The first is to really make sure that when you're explaining your points, that in each of the paragraph they're really unique and distinct, and you're not putting in any sentences that kind of regurgitates what you already said, because that can be a bit confusing for the marker. And the second is always make sure you have some sort of conclusion, whether it be a sentence or a few sentences. Oftentimes, even if the syllabus doesn't, dictate that we want an intro and conclusion, this is already implied. So always make sure you start off well and you also wrap up well.